EFF leader Julius Malema is warning white South Africans that they will lose everything if they don't help transform the economy. Now, Malema's warning comes against backdrop of ANC's call for radical economic transformation. Malema, who has been silent for a while on economic transformation, warned Rand Merchant Bank staff and other financial sector stakeholders on the looming revolution if economy doesn't transform. The renewed headline stance appears to be Malema's attempt to reclaim his voice in the space that has now been occupied by ANC and BLF through their calls for radical economic transformation. Now, meanwhile, questions are being raised about Malema's timing and seriousness of his revolutionary. Here's how Malema seeks to be more radical than the ANC on land. The ANC says land reform must be conducted within the confines of Constitution and the law. But Malema says the Constitution must be changed to allow for expropriation without compensation. The ANC says expropriation without compensation must be used in exceptional circumstances. But Malema says land expropriation without compensation should be in the norm rather than exception.
We agree that using the focus for land redistribution must be accompanied by other measures if we are to achieve the goal at the required pace. Where it is necessary and unavoidable, this may include expropriation without compensation within the law, within the Constitution.
Could Malema's renewed stance be influenced by his insecurity? Here are the likely factors. BLF is emerging as a more radical version of the EFF in the political space. The ANC seems to be taking repossession of Malema's unique radical transformation position. And people's distrust in Malema for his party's failure to carry out threats against ABSA. Malema himself is being accused of having been co-opted by the white monopoly capital. Malema's EFF's partnership with the DA has eroded his credentials as champion of the black cause. Baha'i, we have Adeline Chapen-Chabeleng, who is the Transform of RSA president in our studio tonight. Ntate, welcome to ANN7. And of course, we have our political analyst, Ntate Tshepo Khadima. Welcome to ANN7.
Thank you.
Now, gentlemen, what do you have to say about Malema's utterances? You know, Malema is back again. At first, he was quiet, and now he's back again and is warning white companies, you know, to transform or else face revolution. Ntate Khadima, let's start with you.
Look, I mean, his comments should not be surprising on a number of fronts. We have to bear in mind that when economic freedom fighters started, they started on this very radical rhetoric stance. And for some time, they seemed to be holding course on that. But I think the moment that they were elected into parliament and became members of parliament, they lost their mojo, because we saw them really now starting to concentrate on their own, or at least led by their leader, Mr. Malema, seemingly more seized and obsessed with the personal hatred of one President Jacob Zuma, more than really tackling the issues that they were really founded upon. And it was only a matter of time before somebody could take those issues that they seemed at the beginning to have well articulated and start running with those issues. So obviously it would appear that now they are realizing, I think, the error that they made. But certainly I think the call that he's making, that is a call that I think those, the haves, better pay attention. Because whether it's Mr. Malema or any other, is that when forced radical transformation does come, which would include, amongst other things, expropriation of not just only land, by the way, including even other forms of property without any compensation. Now, that stage, when it appears, when it does arrive, There will be no control. There will be nobody who will be having control. But by and large, my own reflection is that, having analyzed and followed the political work of Mr. Malema over a number of years now, well over 12 years, is that the people that I think he was addressing pretty much don't really have much anything to worry about him being able to actually bring it to fruition or lead efforts to bring that to fruition. So as much as he said the right things and give it the right warning signals, but he would not be the man because he doesn't have the stamina. We saw this in 2008 with the issue of not Lynn Brown, but Barbara Hogan when she was the Minister of Public Enterprises, and the interference they had at ESCOM, and Mr. Malema was still the president of the Youth League. He lost stamina as quickly as he started. He would have what they call pizza paraffin. And on many other issues, by the way, he has not been consistent. So the stamina of being able to doggedly hold on to an issue and keep it in the public domain, but also beyond just identifying what is wrong, coming up with the mechanics of how to bring about solutions is something that he has not shown that he's able to do. So as much as I think he has given the right warning signals, but I don't think that he himself really knows on can he lead the efforts, can he lead in the architecture of actually bring about solution or bring about the transformation that he's talking about, including, of course, ensuring that you do not have concentration of this country's wealth in the hands of the few and of the minority rather, and of the very few within that minority.
Well, Adia, let's hear from you. Do you think that maybe is the ANC's radical transformation maybe reason why Malema is suddenly, all of a sudden wants to reclaim this radical space?
Look, it was expected that you're going to get this kind of reaction from Julius Malema. Remember that in the political space, any political party that does not sort of ride on the coattail of the leading party becomes irrelevant. So you would expect that out of the ANC National Policy Conference, there would be an outburst pronouncement and literally ripping apart whatever achievement the current ruling party, which is the ANC, has achieved through the National Policy Conference. The surprising factor is that he makes mispronouncements about things that were not even really part of what was discussed. He says about the recession that they have not made any, interventions in terms of policy discussions around the recession and everything. How does he know that part? Was he part of the discussion in terms of the commissions? Was he part of the plenaries in terms of report backs out of the particular National Policy Conference of the ANC? So some of these utterances are expected. But again, you have to look at the phenomenon.
Are they not dangerous? I mean, for him now to come out and say that there will be a revolution, if white companies do not transform.
It is expected. Look, remember political value and currency is the threats that you make towards those who are in control of the economy. Right now, he didn't go and stand in the middle of FNB amongst 100,000, electorates and actually start threatening them. He went into a convenient space in an RMB headquarters based in Sandton and started threatening people who are in control of capital.
So should these threats be taken seriously, or are they maybe just...
He's made many threats before, but none of those threats have come to any fruition. But you have to understand...
There were when he made the threat the last time that people must take land by force, there were other people in some communities that went out and they grabbed land by force, which was illegal.
Let me explain
so now that he's
phenomena.
coming back again and saying that there will be a revolution, should people be taking what Malema is saying seriously?
Let me explain the phenomena about land race. Malema has lost the complete claim towards the land revolution. If you remember that the people who were running within the EFF, who ran the land race, were Andile Mkhatama and a group of EFF supporters who broke away and felt that their issues relating to the land program was never articulated properly within the EFF. Thereafter, you had a situation whereby Malema realized that the issue of land is becoming a huge issue that is threatening South Africa's economic security. So he's using that, again, sitting in the midst of investors, sitting amidst people who are actually owners of part of the South African economy and making these particular threats. What is it called? It's called rent seeking, because out of those particular threats, international investors and companies, all that they will do is, how do we contain this man's rage and how do we bargain with him and auction off his values, which is political agendas. So he's particularly putting the land question and he's using it as a bargaining tool, which is not necessarily what we're looking at. We're not looking at a negotiated scenario. The land crisis is currently what it is today because throughout the 23 years, it has never been given proper space to be addressed. So
I'm just going to have to take a break with you for a while, sir. We have on our line right here Kim Heller, a political commentator. Kim, welcome to ANN7.
Thank you.
What do you have to say about our topic for today? Mr. Julius Malema has come out again and saying that white companies must transform or else they will face revolution.
Thank you. My view is that the battle for land return and economic liberation should not be a competition between black political parties, but we need to see an act of unity, because we speak of a free South Africa, but black South Africans remain squatters on their own land, and the current white hold over the economy and the land of South Africa will only be overcome if black South Africans across political parties unify on the question of land return. This is what the President has requested. If we look at the EFF's original policy framework on land expropriation without compensation, it was ideologically very sound. But the EFF has to date failed to realize its radical promise. Having said that, though, if we look at the ANC policy conference this weekend, it did not take the giant leap it should have on the question of land return. Land expropriation without compensation did not emerge triumphant at this policy conference. And my view, and where I do agree with Malema, is that if the Constitution does not provide for land expropriation without compensation, I actually think this is anti-black and anti-transformation, and it should be amended accordingly.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. Tata Khadima, what do you have to say about what Kim is saying? Kim is saying that the ANC conference, they say that the president spoke about the act of unity, and now Malema is coming out and saying, such utterances. What do you have to say about it?
Look, my take on it is that heavy or uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. The economic freedom fighters are not wearing the crown. The crown lies heavily on the head of the African National Congress. Now, the African National Congress has got processes and the times that it wants to handle certain things. For example, you had a policy conference. Another policy conference, they could just have a discussion and recommendations which will only be ratified in December. But the difficulty that I'm seeing is that by the time that the ANC meets in December to elect and also adopt and ratify the various resolutions and the recommendations that have come out of this policy conference, the world will be a different place. And I'm not so sure that actually the African National Congress fully appreciates what a different place and very hostile world, geopolitically, geoeconomically, geostrategically. That's really what we're going to be seeing. On the economic front, there has been some vacillation. They've been in a state of inertia in terms of having to take the hardest decisions. They haven't been doing that. So, yes, Mr. Malema's comments, as we say, the only value that they have, of course, is telling the truth. To say, if that which you are holding dear to yourself and which you have done so for generations, be prepared to lose it. And those that have, that for years and years have been the beneficiaries of an illegal system that have kept the loot. So what Mr. Malema is saying, 100%, he's correct, he's spot on. But is he the person that actually can be able to bring about the solution? The answer is no. He will not be the person to bring about the solution. Now, those that are currently wearing the crown, the responsibility is much heavier on them. And I'm not getting a sense that they fully appreciate, first and foremost, the heavy responsibility that they are carrying, because they should have been taking a lead in these positions. They should have been the ones that were reaching out. If they realize that, hold on a second, by now, the African National Congress should have been knowing on whether or not it is constitutional amendment or is bringing about a legislation through Parliament which can address the issue of land. They should have been knowing by now, and not be sitting in this space whereby they still say, well, let's go and look at means that are lawful. What does it mean, means that are lawful? And come December, we will try and come up with some solution. And if anything, they are the ones that should be showing the maturity of politics, showing the responsibility, and reaching across to all political parties, having negotiations with them, because this issue affects all of us. Because if we do not collectively address it, we are all going to perish together, for we are on the same boat. But the pilot of this ship is the African National Congress. They need to show that maturity, and they are not showing the maturity. So one thing is, we can take issue with Mr. Malema. As I say, okay, I know the shortcomings on his part, that all campaigns he has announced, he has not been able to sustain them. However, take seriously the things that he's saying, and also recognize that currently in terms of the voting or the percentage he sits within Parliament is significant enough for him not to be ignored. For we cannot wait until 2019 to say, let's have a new party emerge, or a coalition of parties who can then solve our problems. Because come 2019, this country, we will be going through the most difficult time geopolitically, because the economy, there's going to be a global economic crash worse than 2008. Are we ready? I didn't get a sense that even the ANC is preparing for that eventuality. If anything, what I think was surprising for me was to hear even the Minister of Finance, and Mr. Malema is right. When Minister of Finance said that we might end up dealing with people who ordinarily would not want to deal with. So that shows that there are no contingency measures in place. And if there are no contingency measures, is one thing that Mr. Malema can highlight this thing as the leader of the economic freedom fighters. But beyond that, what else can he really do? For he's not wearing the crown. The people that are wearing the crown, they need to show that maturity. I'm not seeing that maturity. And the maturity might include, even now, really going to talk to him or talk to his party. For if we do not, if we are all saying this is serious, we all need to pay attention and make sure that we can work together. And I think Kim Heller is quite correct in what she's saying, that let us look at the issues that are facing us instead of what our personal styles are.
And let me just cut you. I just want to talk about just a bit about why Malema was silent all along, especially about, the apartheid era, the ABSA loan. All of a sudden now he's coming out. Why would you think that he's coming out now? What was his silence about, on especially the apartheid era, the apartheid ABSA loan? The BLF even came out to say, Malema, EFF, let's come together with BLF movement and let us fight ABSA for this loan. And now all of a sudden he's coming out. What would you have to say about that, Adi?
I think the key issue that is emerging here is the media has a very love and hate relationship with Malema. One is, whenever there's positive developments, they will always be turning to an individual, for instance, like Julius Malema, who will come in and rip whatever good progress that has been made or that is currently being made, and they will move away from the shift of what should be really discussed. How do we take South Africa forward? For instance, we know the challenges of what is happening within a crisis that we are faced with, which is a recession. From a Transform RSA point of view, we will explain to you basics. What the recession contains, what stimulated this recession we're sitting with, and how do we resolve a situation of recession. One, we have commodities prices that are highly low, at lowest ever been since 2007, right? You have a drought that has affected South Africa. So you are guaranteed to have a negative, 2 quarters of your, in terms of your economic cycle, were not active within an economy. The other aspect of it is the entire crisis of a recession within South Africa is not by the doing of South Africa. It's an international cycle. So people have to be made to understand. But to be using platforms and taking media towards making a crisis which is not necessarily endemic from a South African point of view, which is a global crisis, and you're using it, and then you use land as a precursor to a violent outcome. it's not the most, what you call aptitude thing to do. In this case, you would have expected Malema to be far much more smoother and wiser and presented to himself as really a diplomat to bring about a solution, going to banks and telling them that you are facing a crisis and we are going to liquidate you in terms of violently, by violent means, by occupying your land and taking over, unless you come to us and you negotiate a settlement. It's not the most wise thing to do.
Look, I mean, my view is this. Mr. Malema will regain credibility if he can have a complete break with the past, with the recent past. You know, his association, his meeting, and his seeming love with Lord Renwick, that is going to cost his party. For as long as he has never distanced himself from Lord Renwick, for as long as he's never distanced himself from all these other cozy relationships he has with people who effectively are the enemies of progress, he is going to have a credibility a crisis, and I'm not sure he can be able to move out of it. So he must make it clear which flag. His colors must be nailed to the mast. Right now, we don't know what flag he's actually, is on his mast and in these waters. And I think that is the crisis he has.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Right on NN7. Yes, that was Ndata Adili Chabileng, right? The president of Transform RSA, and of course our political analyst, and that's Hepo Khadima. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.